Hello. Today I would like to talk to you about registration. Registration for a new company, a new pharmaceutical quality system. Now, if you're setting up something new, you're going fresh from start, and you want to register so that you can actually supply pharmaceutical products, you always have to consider your starting point. Now, in this case study, what I'm going to talk to you about is a company that already had a good distribution practice license. Now, they've been trying, and I emphasize trying, to get themselves an MIA, Manufacturing Import Authorization, for the supply of medicinal products, manufacture and supply. Now, what was the problem that they had? Well, they failed twice. Why did they fail twice? Well, they got in a consultant first, and they said, right, we need to set it up like this. And you need to design your facility like this, and you need to do your layout, and then we'll put all these extra controls in place, and then you can just use my SOPs. So what did they do? Well, they built a mezzanine above the wholesale distribution site. They set it up like any other standard manufacturing site. They had a main central area where they could bring the goods into, where they could bring the components into. They had a separate area for quarantine. They had 3 rooms, which were all segregated, and they had a bench for goods in, which they used to check. But the problem is they didn't think about the activities in each different location. So when it came to doing the inspection, their consultant went through the SOPs. That's fine. The inspector then related the SOPs to the activities in each of the different areas. Well, that hadn't been considered. All that had been considered was, this is the layout, and these are the SOPs. But the two had never met, because the SOPs were based on previous history from the consultant, not from the consultant and the business working together. So they failed. So they brought somebody else in, somebody new. They had the set of SOPs, and they had their layout, and their new consultant said, oh, we can help you do that. And they made some changes to the SOPs. Unfortunately, all they did was replace the existing ones with their own. So we went through the process, and the MHRA came in, the inspector came in, and they reviewed the SOPs and they asked some questions. Now, what the consultant hadn't done was train the people within the business. So the MHRA came in and they asked questions. So, well, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? And unfortunately, the consultant didn't answer. Instead, they left the team to answer this time. So the first time, the consultant answered, but they answered based on their own SOPs with no understanding of what activity was going to go on within the business. How can you do that? So when I go to a company, and I went to this same company, and I looked at the SOPs that they had in place, and I looked at the design of the facility, the first thing we did was we reviewed how things were segregated, where things would come in, where the people would go, where they would sit, where the activities would take place. And unfortunately, we had to redesign it so that the process would actually flow. We set up some new barriers so that you had separation between quarantine, released, reject, as is expected in Usual-X. And on top of that, we looked at the way that they were going to do the printing. They'd actually forgotten to include the printing for labels. They were not doing it outside. They were going to do it in-house, but they hadn't allowed for the space within the GMP facility. So they couldn't actually do any line clearance. They couldn't set up their label process so that you had one here, one here, one here. They had 3 separate printers because, of course, you've got one size for your small cartons for your vials. You've got another size for your larger cartons. You've got another size for your outer boxes. So they had 3 printers, but no separation between them. No, we put this here, we do the process, finished, off it goes, and we kit it up for the next job. Wasn't included, wasn't considered. They didn't have anything for how the business would actually operate. So what I did with them, I worked through the process with them to make sure they understood the activities they were doing, make sure I understood the activities that they planned to do, that they wanted to achieve. And actually, I took them through a process of training. I trained them so that they all had an understanding of what good manufacturing practice was. I trained them in the requirements for GDP that interfaced with their GMP requirements, because unfortunately they hadn't kept themselves up to date with GDP. Even though they had the license, they hadn't been doing the continuing professional development. So I helped them and supported them delivering that as well. We continued and we rearranged the layout. We set up a separate room for the printing that linked directly, and we included controls for printed packaging. Controls being security, of course. We went through the SOPs and actually designed them to do the job. We had to update them, of course, and they understood at the end of it what the SOPs were about, what the intention was, and what activities would be required and who would do what. They didn't rely on me as the QP to answer all the questions. We worked together. We worked together to develop a pharmaceutical quality system that was actually fit for purpose, not one that they just bought off the shelf. And the MHRA came in and the inspection went well. We delivered it together. We worked together. I, of course, was the primary host. But that didn't mean they didn't answer the questions. The person that we'd allocated to do the printing answered the questions about the printing, about the segregation, about how the goods would come in, about how they would go out. Was the right people answering the questions? Yes, of course, I was there supporting them. I was doing the introductions. I was helping them make sure that they directed the questions to the right response, because they hadn't done it before. I first started hosting inspections back in the 90s, and I know that's a long time ago, and it's unfortunately more time ago than some of the people that I'm now training. And I often find now that even in the example I'm talking about, one of the ladies there wasn't even born when I did my first inspection hosting. But we got the result we wanted. They got their license first attempt. Now, granted, it took longer than it should have done. And that was primarily because we had to fix the problems that had been created by the previous consultants that had supported them. Now, it's really important to understand, whenever you create a pharmaceutical quality system, whenever you adapt an existing quality management system, now by that, I usually find that it's an ISO standard. Whenever you create SOPs, they have to be appropriate for use. And you don't do them on your own. Don't have one person write all the SOPs for you. Write them together. Make sure everybody understands that's involved in the process. And I know you can't do an SOP as a committee, but one person can draft it, the others can review it, and you sign off approved at the end. Now, this is just one example of several. I am still, of course, working with clients to register new manufacturing import authorizations, whether that be commercial for import, whether it be investigational medicinal product, or whether it's a manufacturing your product. I'm there to help get it right in the first place, so that you too can have your manufacturing import authorization granted the first time you have the inspection, not iterations through processes because it wasn't done right in the first place. And if you're interested in my support, please do contact me here with a direct message. So that's it for today, and I'll talk to you soon.